So, and there are some resources. There's a great book, Dale McGowan's book, Parenting Beyond Belief, if you've seen that. It's got some good pointers in there for alternatives. What do you do when the kids come home from school and they hear about Jesus and God? What do you tell them, or should you say anything? So there are resources out there on that. But I'm not an expert. My suggestion is don't take parenting too seriously. Just let the kids think for themselves, explore for themselves, make their own decisions, and even if they disagree with me, I'm happy when my kids beat me in an argument. I mean, that makes me proud. I don't have this ego that I have to send them to hell because they offended the father figure.
Much has been said about the incredible shrinking God. That is, as science discovers more about the world, the reduced explanatory necessity of having a God. And I'm going to say just a little bit more on that. Ray Kurzweil spoke here about a year ago talking about the singularity, this idea that as computers grow exponentially in power, eventually computer intellect will exceed human intellect, if only to the extent that computers will be powerful enough to just simulate a brain. Do you think that as the necessity for God to explain the soul, to explain the actions of the mind, is reduced, do you think that will result in a reduced religiosity or an increased rationality? That is, you can have something that's non-religious that is nevertheless irrational, things like homeopathy and that sort of thing. What do you think? I'm sorry I'm asking you to prophesy here, but from your perspective, how do you think that will change the cultural landscape once the mind is well understood in terms of science?
Yeah. Well, it happened to me. I mean, if people like me change, and it happened to some of you here, right? Some of you were devoutly religious, and the more you learned and were educated about science, the more we saw our place within the bigger picture, our religiosity diminished. So I'm an optimist, and I think religion will never disappear, because there's always going to be a subset of human beings who are in it for purely emotional reasons. It gives them this feeling and peace that they could never get anywhere else. There's always going to be those people, right? Even in Denmark, there's about 5% God believers still, right? But so it's never going to disappear, and why should it? I mean, as long as they're not hurting anybody, as long as their faith isn't, But it's happened to me, and it looks like it's happening on this continent, and it happened in Europe, and I think, if you want a magic bullet of one single thing, education is the key. And that was part of my own brain. If I stuck with my fundamentalist upbringing and not read science, and I used to preach against evolution, I didn't know what the heck it was. And I was so surprised when I finally understood evolution and went, oh, that's cool. I remember thinking it was something totally different that I was opposed to. But when you read it and study it and fall in love with it, you can say, well, in fact, most believers accept evolution. So it's not like a conflict between faith and evolution. But I think you're right. I think the more we're educated, especially in places like this, right, religious devotion and religious belief will decrease, just like sexism has decreased and racism has decreased, and we don't feel like we've lost something with those things. I'm going to talk at a conference in Toronto in February, World Affairs Conference, and the theme is science the new global religion? And I responded to them, and I said, I don't know if you want me to come and talk about that, because I'm going to say, no, it isn't. That would be like asking, is medicine the new global disease? And they said, great, come and say that. So I'm going to go say that.
Thank you.
My name is Dan with Upstate Atheists. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for everything you do. In your book, your first book, Losing Faith and Faith, was instrumental in my deconversion of my intellectual maturity.
Wow. So I get a star in my crown?
My question is, you and I actually probably get this quite often, is your foundation for morality. Because you don't believe in God, you obviously have no foundation in morality. How do you answer that question? Just to explain, I've seen Dawkins try to answer it, and as an evolutionary biologist, I would think that he would have a really good explanation, but it doesn't really seem to come across very well. I just wonder what your take on that was.
Well, yes and say no. And there are even some atheists who believe that numbers are platonic realities. I mean, there are some even atheist dualists in the world, so I can't speak for them all. But I think when you ask a question like, what is the foundation for morality, you're already begging the question. You're already assuming that if morality needs a foundation, then there must be something external to us that gives us a context from which morality can be bestowed. You're already kind of assuming a transcendence just by even allowing that question to be asked. I don't think morality needs a foundation. It's like upside down. It's not exactly the same, but the flat earthers, they pictured this flat earth with these pillars below and the underworld, and then there's this firmament above. And when science showed them and us that no, it's not a flat earth thing, that the earth is actually the sphere that's resting on nothing. There's no foundation. It's not resting on anything at all. That was just too mind-boggling for those people back then. For some people even today to consider, what do you mean? And when Galileo was forced to recant, but he still privately said, but it still moves. How can it move without being on a foundation? Well, how can that be? It was mind-blowing to the world. And I think we fall into the same trap when we ask questions like, what is the foundation of morality? As if morality were a thing, a flat earth thing that has to be resting on something. In my conception, morality is just a label for a function. The computational brain is making a value function decision, And in order to survive, we have to make these computations. Is this something that I should be afraid of? Should I run from it or run to it? Should I eat it? Should I mate with it? Should I hide from it? Should I what? Our brains have to make these values all the time. And as a parallel, what is the foundation of digestion? Digestion is just a label for the functioning of an organ, right? And if those steps are followed, that organ will end up digesting food, and it will minimize the risk that the whole organism will become extinct. So that doesn't mean that because we have the word digestion, which describes what an organ is, how it functions, it somehow there's this big cosmic de-digestion in the cosmos. What's the foundation of digestion? It's totally upside down. Well, I think morality is just a function of a brain or of a mind. And mind is itself a function. This is just my own thinking. So it's upside down to ask for that. Morality doesn't need a standard or a measure. It's just a compass. A compass will point you to north, and the compass is really simple. If something causes more harm than something else, regardless of how you measure it or what you call it, then a moral person is a person who attempts to end up with less harm in the real world. So the compass is harm. The foundation of morality is really harm is a natural thing. It can be a predator, it can be lack of shelter, it can be disease, it can be a hurricane, whatever the harm can be to us, lack of water. If we act in ways that minimize that harm or lessen that harm, then that's what morality means by a choice of our brain. It doesn't mean anything else. It's not resting on something. It's not. The compass doesn't tell you where you are. It just points. If one hand's in an oven and one's in a freezer, you don't need to measure. You just know. You know which